TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift Farms' leading sire, Malibu Moon, sire of the most Kentucky Derby starters this decade, including 2013 Derby winner Orb.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, we're here. It is the Kentucky Derby week, man. This is a show that everyone's been looking forward to. Let's talk about these contenders. And let's start off, obviously we can't talk about 20 contenders.
Sure.
And there's not, 20 horses that you feel can actually win the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of show our contenders and our pretenders. We'll look through the list of pretenders real quick. When I look through there, I don't see any horse that I really have any arguments with there for pretenders. But I do think that this is a year, it's pretty wide open. It's one of those years that I think any horse can kind of maybe have their best day and show up and really run well in the Kentucky Derby. Tell me, do you kind of feel the same way? Or?
Absolutely, man. It's wide open this year, John. But every Derby you can eliminate about half the field. Let's be honest. That's where you have to start this thing. That's why we're starting with this graphic. I really feel like these 10 in particular aren't going to win the Kentucky Derby, in my opinion. Particularly this bottom 6 here. Some people say, well, Whitmore's an interesting horse. I didn't like the way he ran last time out, so he's a closer I'm willing to throw out. He's a shorter coupled, stockier type horse, maybe plays more of that Scat Daddy. I'm not convinced he's a classic horse, so I'm dropping him. The rest are logical drops. Danzy Candy, that outside speed from the 20 hole.
Sure.
I think there's plenty of speed in the race that's going to prove to be better than him. And when I look at the minor awards, sudden breaking news, not a real agile horse. Doesn't run the turns well. He's doing well here. He's one of that cluster of closers along the inside from the 2 to the 6 post that has a chance if he gets the trip. They all need the trip. If he gets the trip, he can certainly hit the board. So I have him on minor awards, but he's not winning these preps, and he's not an agile horse who runs the turns well. So I like some other ones better with a better turn of foot, better ability to put themselves into a closing position. So Chagoff's training well enough here. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I still don't think he can win this race. I see him in the second flight. I think they'll forwardly place him a little bit. Mahesto is a true mile and a quarter horse. Don't know how good he is. Took him forever to break his maiden. And then Gunrunner. A lot of people will say, well, Gunrunner's a horse that you don't think can win. I really have always questioned Gunrunner's ability against the best of his generation. He's a horse that hasn't run that fast. You can't knock him for winning, John, but he hasn't beat much down there, particularly when Mo Tom has gotten in trouble in some of these races.
Right.
So based on what I've seen, Gunrunner handles this track well. He ran well in the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes last year. For me, he's not a win candidate, but I do think he can get a minor award.
All right, well, let's look at the TCI top 10, and this is the final one here before going into the Kentucky Derby. And, it's interesting. You talk about Gunrunner. I see you drop Outwork off of this list. He was on the last list. You had Gunrunner over there as just a minor award. So it's a little misleading there. What you're thinking of dropping Outwork off of here and putting Gunrunner on TCI top 10?
The only reason I believe that Outwork has a shot to win is I think he'll be on the lead. And I think there's a chance that Nyquist could be wrangled back maybe in a stalking type position. And maybe he doesn't run as well, particularly at classic distance, being rated like that. Same thing with Mohamed. I think he'll show some speed in that second flight. More spirit will be there. Danzy Candy, from the 20 hole, they've said that, they're anxious to be outside of speed, maybe taking back with him. So I could see a possibility with big, long striding Outwork, gets out on a pretty comfortable lead here. And if the track is playing speed and everything comes together, those horses that are choked down a little bit don't kick on. He extends that stride of his, goes on, and the track carries him around and wins. I could see that scenario, but for me, I do think Gunrunner is a better classic candidate. When I look at his pedigree, his tactical speed, to me, he fits most of the scenarios that I think are going to play out in this race better, particularly the fact that, it's a 10 furlong race. I just think altogether he is a little bit better of a classic candidate. But, we're talking about 10 and 11. They're basically interchangeable for me. I just think if everything lines up, Outworks away, I could see him going wire to wire. And speed's dangerous in any race. He's training well here. So even though I don't think he's particularly a great classic horse, and he's had a lot of trips go his way, he kind of looks like the Verrazano this year, a lot of talent. He's going to wow you with the way he works, but he's always in the clear in his races. He's going to face some pressure here. But if everything goes his way, he can win. That's the reason I have it listed the way I did.
All right, so it really looks like you got these 9 horses then that you think have a chance to win this year. Tell me, how do you see the Derby setting up, and take me through the break and through to the finish line?
Well, the break, I wish I had a crystal ball on the break. Every year Some people, I mean, there's horses that obviously get wiped out of the break. They break a little tardy, or, the one thing that you'll want to pay attention to most, in my opinion, is that obviously it's been well documented since the draw. The speed is from Nyquist all the way out to More Spirit, and then even Danzig Candy if you go out to the 20 hole. Really, everything is to the outside that's going to be making a firm run to that first turn. Well, what happens is, if you can recall in a lot of derbies, these horses try to get position and they run to that turn and you see the field swing in. Well, there's a lot of closers on the inside.
Right.
I would be a little concerned if I were, the connections of, Destin, Gun Runner, some of these tactical kind of horses drawn inside that are going to be able to outbreak these closers. And what's going to happen is you're going to have this wave of speed going towards the rail, and a lot of times you'll have this herd of horses that'll just sideswipe some of these inside horses, totally cut them off, and it'll hurt them. I mean, we saw that with Danza, and we've seen that with Looking at Luck, even though he did draw the rail. We've seen that in the past. So my big concern is how this speed is going to materialize in the first turn, and whose trips are going to be compromised on the inside when it all funnels down to the rail and people start getting shuffled back. You might see some checking, you'll see some bumping going on. Happens every year, John.
All right, so we get through the break, everybody shuffles in there, they're gonna find their way. There's gonna be some traffic problems. Take me to the back side of the track and tell me, how do you think the horses are looking there?
I think at this point in the race is when you see the Derby pace slow down. They'll run earnestly to the first turn, but then, having the 1.25 mile consciousness, these jockeys always take a hold down that backstretch and do whatever they can to save every little bit of energy. And that's where that internal half mile is so crucial to how the pace is going to end up in this race and whether or not the closers have a real chance. I do think the field will be fairly strung out, though, because a lot of these closers on the inside, they'll just fall out of the gate. They won't make any attempt to really get up into the race, in my opinion. I don't think a ton of them will anyway. So that's a real key part of the race down that backstretch. How the spacing in the race, how the pace is going to, play out. If anybody's going to try to push it, maybe a Mohamed, maybe a Nyquist tries to push it, maybe even More Spirit tries to push it. Very crucial once they hit that 5/8 pole, how that pace is going to play out and how much pushing is going to go on there. And then also, that's when the closers start to try to find holes to open up, to move up on that far turn. That's going to be critical too. And what gets critical with that too, if the pace is faster, well, obviously the more strung out the field is, the more area there is to maneuver.
Sure.
So that's all critical. It's impossible to predict the pace. I think it's going to be a fair pace. I don't think it'll be a sizzling pace, but I do think it'll be a fair pace based on the amount of tactical horses that are doing very sharp right now at Churchill.
One thing that's worth mentioning to the fans, and when you're trying to talk about the Kentucky Derby, if you've never been there and you don't hear the horses coming out of that gate and running down that stretch for the first time, I mean, some of those horses, the noise that they hear behind them, they're never going to hear that many horses behind them again. So it kind of presses the pace a little bit. And a horse like Mohamed, who's already super key, we've been watching him train this week. I mean, if he's out in front and he's hearing those horses, I mean, he could really, sneak out there.
Absolutely. I think he's definitely a pace presence this year, John. I don't think there's any way around it. And pay attention to the way these horses are in the paddock and in the lead over. I mean, see who's reacting to it. He's one I could see that might get a little wound up with the energy that's in the facility, the 150,000 people that are going to be there. That's important, and you're right, that's going to dictate maybe how a lot of these horses are able to settle or get unsettled in the race. And a lot of these horses can run their race before they even load into the gate.
All right, so take me to the top of the stretch then. You're about to, this is it, and we're coming down. They're going to hit the stretch. How do you see the horses at that point?
Well, if you looked at the TCI top 10, the two horses I've had 1-2 for the longest time were horses that had the best classic profiles. And what I meant by that, good connections, great pedigree to handle 10 furlongs, the style to handle this type of race. And when I say style, I think that's so critical, John. Destin and More Spirit, two horses that are proven to be graded stakes winners, true 10 furlong type pedigrees, total 10 furlong makeups when you look at their physical makeup, great connections with Pletcher and Baffert. Two horses I think are doing pretty well right now. They're going to like this racetrack, but they've got tactical speed. They're able to clip off, 12s and really put their jockeys in a position to stay in the thick of it and get in the right spots. One thing with these closers is, that you really can't, you can never figure out in a 20-horse field is you're going to see so many horses that are going to have to navigate through 3/4 of the field,
right?
And you just cannot guarantee a trip for any of them. I mean, there's a lot of nice closers in here. You can't guarantee a trip for any of them. You can if you're on a horse like Gunrunner, if you're on a horse like Destin, you're on a horse like More Spirit. Those horses will be tactical. They have the ability to cruise in that second flight, put their jockey in a scenario where they can win, and then still finish down that stretch, accelerate at 1.25 miles, and prove to be best. And that's why they're not 1-2 for me. At this point, top of the stretch, I could see Mohamed having a lead. To me, I think he's the most talented horse in the race. But I think Destin and Javier Castellano, I think Gary Stevens and More Spirit are going to be well placed in the stretch. I think they're two horses that could have a chance to, be right there at the 8th pole. And then the question will be, how fast was the pace and who's coming at that point?
Right.
Motom, Creator, where are the closers and who's coming? Sudden breaking news, my man Sam, horse that's looked great this week. That's where we're going to be at the 8th pole.
All right, and take me to the stretch, or take me to the finish line, and tell me, do you think that a horse that's in the lead is going to hold on this year, or do you think that there's going to be a horse that'll be a closer, he'll get that dream trip and come up and nab him at the wire?
Yeah, I think, I should have said at the quarter pole, I think Mohamen's the horse that maybe leads him into the stretch, a la Normandy Invasion in past years, or Noble's Promise, a horse that is a very talented horse that can maybe sit right off of it and get to that spot. However, in that second flight, I really love Destin's ability to get there at the 8th pole, turning for home. His problem is when that crowd starts roaring, he's a horse that likes to look around a little bit. We've seen the physical maturation of Destin through his last few races. And what's interesting is I like him for the opposite reason that people don't like him. People don't like Destin because they say, oh, he's been off 8 weeks.
Right.
Pletcher doesn't have a good Derby record. Well, Pletcher's Derby record and his record overall is he's usually getting these horses that need final points in these final preps, and they run huge to get the points to get in. They got to turn around in 4 weeks, and his program does better when he has time to prep them. Think about Liam's Map. Think about horses that Todd's won grade ones with, bringing them off of an extended layoff. He's very good at it. This horse has looked great the last 2 weeks. Great health. He looks like a happy horse. He's tailor-made for 10 furlongs. I love his maturation. Destin, we started the show in January. I would not have picked him to win this race. He wasn't on the TCI top 10. He has taken those steps, John. I love the way they brought him into this race fresh. I think he's the horse to beat in here. I think he gets the lead, the 8th pole, runs on in here. And the closers that I'm looking for to run up behind him, Motom. I've talked about how much I love his talent. If he can navigate a good trip from the inside, I see Motom running up for second in here behind Destin. And then another deep closer, Creator's thriving at Churchill Downs right now. I see Creator, if he can get the trip too, not as nimble as Motom, doesn't have the turn of foot, but he'll keep coming and coming at 1.25 miles. I see Creator running third. And I think my man Sham is also another closer that's looked great. Like I said, it's going to run big. But those are the three. You got to pare it down from 20 to 3. Those are my 3, and I love Destin to win.
All right, man. Well, you've been following him. You've really been keeping a close eye
got?
on him. I'll tell you, I see it a little different. I think it's going to get more stretched out, like we talked about. I think there's going to be some horses that are going to try to just take it all the way around. So I think there's going to be that room for a closer to come through. And I'm going to go with Creator because I just think I'm going for the opposite. This is a horse that's been well tested. He's kind of going the other direction where it's a lot of races. I think he's going to have enough, in the tank. I think he's going to get it done.
Give me an Oaks pick.
Oaks pick. I think I'm going to go with Land Over Sea. She's such a good filly.
Training well.
And, she had to go against Songbird. When you look at her record, it's Songbird, Songbird, Songbird. Sure. She's second all the time. So with her coming out, I think she's training well. I think she's going to be the one. Who you got?
I think Land Over Sea and Rachel's Valentina are the two most likely winners based on their numbers and how they're coming into this race. But I'm going to go with a long shot here in Royal Obsession. I just love the way this filly is trained. She's 21 morning line. I think you'll get 12, 15 to 1 on her. She's a big filly out of a Tappet of a Tisnow mare, resembles that Tisnow physical. She's going to love 1 mile and 1/8, and just like the maturation there. She needs a pace up front, but I think if she gets that pace, which she probably will, she'll close into it. So I like Royal Obsession. So if you're looking for Oaks Derby doubles, really Royal Obsession, maybe Lewis Bay, maybe Rachel's Valentina, and even maybe Land Over Sea. Those 4 I would use back with some of these other horses that I mentioned. That's kind of the way I'm going to go with it, and if it hits, I think it's going to pay.
Well, we'll see if we come back next week, and if Nyquist makes us both look foolish. We're kind of betting against the champ this time.
That's a horse we didn't mention at all this show, and that's an indication. He's a polarizing horse. Some people either love him or they don't like him. You'll hear a million opinions on Nyquist. I've seen his works. I've seen him train. I've been to Keeneland, I've been to Churchill. He doesn't do it for me. I'm willing to beat Nyquist going 1.25 miles. He's a champ. It wouldn't shock me if he hit the board. Wouldn't shock me if he won the race and proved me wrong yet again. He's been doing it all along.
Yep.
I don't like him in this race.
All right, thank you, Joel. And thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We're going to get to recap this year's Kentucky Derby.